It was a beautiful morning when Jason and Emily set off on their long-awaited trip. The car was packed with snacks, travel guides, and excitement. The couple had been planning this getaway for months, hoping to enjoy some quiet time together before their baby arrived. Emily, who was 8 months pregnant, had always dreamed of a peaceful trip, and Jason was determined to make it happen. He had worked hard, saved up, and wanted this vacation to be a chance to unwind. "Just a few more hours, and we'll be there," Jason said, glancing at Emily, who was sitting comfortably next to him. Emily smiled, though she couldn't hide the discomfort in her expression. She was due to give birth any day now, and her body was starting to feel the strain. She had been feeling some mild pains over the past few days, but she didn't want to worry Jason. This trip meant so much to both of them, and she didn't want to spoil the mood. "Are you okay?" Jason asked, noticing the slight wince on her face. "Do you need to stop for a break?" Emily nodded, though she tried to brush it off. "I'm fine, really. Just a little ache. I'm used to it," she replied, her voice calm but tinged with uncertainty. She didn't want to admit how much pain she was in. She didn't want to worry him. Jason, with his usual confidence, assured her they'd make it to their destination soon and that she would feel better once they were able to relax. As they drove down the long highway, the scenery passing by, Emily's discomfort grew. The pain in her abdomen came and went, but it was becoming more frequent. She shifted in her seat, trying to get comfortable, but nothing seemed to help. Every bump on the road seemed to make it worse. "Maybe we should pull over for a little while," she suggested, her voice now tinged with concern. Jason looked over at her, his brow furrowing. "Are you sure it's necessary? We're not far from the next town, and I know you're just tired," he said, trying to reassure her. He was focused on the road ahead, determined to stick to the plan. The trip was supposed to be relaxing, and he didn't want anything to ruin it. Emily hesitated, then nodded. She wasn't sure if this was just regular pregnancy discomfort or something more serious, but she didn't want to alarm Jason. "Okay, let's keep going a bit longer," she agreed. But soon, the pain became impossible to ignore. It wasn't just an ache anymore. It was sharp, constant, and coming in waves. Emily's breathing grew heavier as the contractions started, and she could no longer hide her discomfort. She gripped the seat, her eyes squeezed shut as another wave of pain hit. "Jason, I think it's time. The baby's coming. We need to stop," she cried out, panic creeping into her voice. Jason's face changed immediately. His hands tightened on the wheel, and his eyes flickered between the road and Emily. But instead of pulling over, he glanced at the clock and sighed. "We're so close, Emily. We'll be fine. Just hold on for a little longer, okay?" he said, his tone calm but dismissive. "I'm sure it'll be fine. We can make it." Emily felt a wave of fear wash over her. She knew things were happening faster than they should, but Jason didn't seem to understand the urgency. The pain was unbearable, and she could feel her body preparing for what was next. Emily could feel her body changing with every passing minute. The pain had gone from uncomfortable to intense, and she knew something was wrong. She gripped the seat harder as another wave of pain hit her. She tried to breathe through it, but it wasn't enough to ease the ache. "Jason, please, we need to stop now. I don't think I can hold on much longer," Emily gasped, her voice shaking with urgency. Jason's eyes darted to her briefly, but he didn't seem to fully understand the seriousness of the situation. "Emily, we're almost there. Just a little bit longer," he said, his voice calm, but his hands tightened on the steering wheel. "Let's just keep going." But Emily's panic was growing. This wasn't just a few cramps anymore. This was labor, and it was happening fast. She tried to focus on her breathing, but it was getting harder with every contraction. The pain was unbearable now, and Emily's mind raced. She could no longer ignore the fact that the baby was coming. Now, not later. She felt completely helpless. Why wasn't Jason taking this seriously? Why wasn't he stopping the car? "I can't wait anymore, Jason. I think I'm really going to have the baby right here," Emily cried out, her voice filled with panic. Jason, still focused on the road, seemed to brush off her words. "You're just overreacting, Emily. The baby's not coming yet. Let's get to the next town, and we'll go straight to the hospital." Emily closed her eyes tightly, trying to stay calm, but the fear and pain were overwhelming. She felt trapped in the car, each passing minute making her feel more out of control. She looked out the window, hoping for some kind of sign, anything that could change the situation. The seconds dragged on, each one feeling like an eternity. Emily's heart raced as her contractions grew stronger, faster, and more frequent. She squeezed her eyes shut again, trying to steady her breathing, but it was impossible to ignore the fear crawling up her spine. "Jason," she cried out once more, this time with all the strength she had left. "I need help. Please stop." Jason finally turned to look at her, his face tightening with worry. But still, he didn't stop the car. "Emily, I'm sure it'll be fine. You're probably just scared. Let's just get to the hospital." At that moment, Emily felt a sharp pain unlike anything she'd ever experienced before. It was the kind of pain that made her feel as though she might pass out. She gasped, unable to catch her breath. She couldn't take it any longer. The baby was coming. Her water broke with a sudden gush, and she felt her world spin. She screamed out, clutching her stomach, tears streaming down her face. "Jason, please, I need you to stop now," she shouted. Jason looked at her in shock, the reality of the situation finally sinking in. He slammed on the brakes and pulled the car over to the side of the road. The sound of the tires screeching against the pavement seemed to echo in the tense silence. Emily was no longer able to keep it together. She was breathing heavily, sweat covering her forehead. She was in labor, and Jason had finally realized that there was no turning back. The car was now parked on the side of the road, and Emily's heart raced, but they were still so far from the hospital. "Please, Jason, I need you to help me," Emily whispered through the pain, feeling the fear rise in her chest. Jason looked at her, panic creeping into his own eyes. He was too late to turn back now. Jason's heart raced as he looked at Emily, who was now clutching her stomach, her face pale and filled with fear. It wasn't just a little pain anymore. It was clear that the baby was coming, and it was coming fast. But even though he saw the panic in her eyes, something inside him held him back from fully understanding the urgency of the situation. He had always been focused on getting to their destination, on completing the trip they had been planning for so long. "We're almost there, Emily. Just hold on. I'll go get help as soon as we can get to the town," Jason said, his voice trembling slightly. He looked around, trying to find any sign of a nearby hospital or emergency help, but the road was empty. Emily's eyes filled with tears as another wave of pain hit her, stronger than before. She could barely catch her breath as she cried out in agony. "Jason, please. I don't think I can wait. The baby is coming now, not later." Her voice was full of desperation, but Jason still didn't seem to grasp how serious it was. "Emily, listen to me," Jason said, trying to calm her down, though his own anxiety was growing. "I'll take care of everything. You just have to trust me. We're so close to the hospital, and everything will be fine. Don't worry. You're just getting worked up." Emily could barely respond. The pain was becoming too much. She felt a wave of helplessness wash over her. She had trusted Jason to be there for her, to protect her, but now it felt like he was making things worse. "Jason, please, stop," she gasped, her voice barely a whisper through the pain. "I need to go to the hospital now. The baby can't wait." But Jason, still thinking the trip was the priority, made a decision that would change everything. "We'll be okay, Emily. I'll go back soon. Okay. I just need to grab something from the back, and I'll be right back." Emily watched in shock as Jason got out of the car, leaving her alone by the side of the road. It wasn't a long trip, but it felt like an eternity to her. She couldn't understand why he was leaving her alone when she needed him the most. Tears streamed down Emily's face as she struggled to breathe through the pain. Every minute felt like an hour. The contractions were coming faster now, and she could feel her strength fading. Her body was doing things she couldn't control, and she needed Jason's help. But now, as she sat there, in a car parked on the side of a quiet road, she realized that she was completely alone. She had trusted Jason to be there, and now he was gone. In the distance, she could hear the faint sound of a car driving by. But there was no one around to help her. Emily, unable to move, leaned against the seat, closing her eyes in frustration and fear. The minutes stretched on, and she couldn't help but wonder if Jason even realized the gravity of the situation. Had he misunderstood her pain? Had he really thought she was just overreacting? Just as Emily began to think there was no way out, she heard the sound of another car approaching. She blinked away the tears and tried to sit up. Someone was finally coming. And maybe, just maybe, there was a chance to get help before it was too late. Emily's heart skipped a beat as she heard the sound of tires crunching on the gravel road. She quickly turned her head, hoping for help, but all she could see was a small car approaching. Her eyes were blurry with tears, but she could still make out a figure in the driver's seat, a woman. The car slowed down as it neared her, and the woman's face was filled with concern. She rolled down the window and looked at Emily, who was struggling to catch her breath. "Are you okay?" the woman asked, her voice kind and full of worry. Emily wanted to scream for help, but her throat was dry, and she could barely speak through the pain. I'm in labor. The baby is coming, and I need to get to the hospital," Emily managed to say, her voice trembling. The woman's eyes widened in shock, and she immediately parked her car behind Emily's. "Oh no, you're having the baby now. We need to get you some help. Stay right here, okay?" she said, rushing out of her car. Emily didn't have the strength to reply, but she nodded weakly. She felt like she was fading in and out of consciousness, and her mind was clouded with fear. She couldn't believe this was happening. Her baby was coming, and she was stranded on the side of the road, alone except for a stranger who had stopped to help. The woman hurried to the back of her car and pulled out a phone. She called emergency services, explaining the situation as calmly as she could. "There's a woman in labor on the side of the road. She's alone, and we need an ambulance fast. Please send help." As the woman spoke, another car pulled up behind them. This time, it was a man who also appeared to be a stranger. He saw Emily and immediately ran over to help. "What's going on? What can we do?" he asked, his face filled with concern. The woman quickly explained the situation, and the man nodded. "We need to keep her calm. Help is on the way." Emily was barely able to focus on their words. Her body was shaking, and she felt like the contractions were never going to stop. But hearing the strangers' voices was a small comfort. They were doing everything they could to help her, and that gave her a little bit of hope. The woman crouched down beside Emily, gently placing a hand on her shoulder. "We're going to make sure everything's okay. Just breathe, all right? You're not alone anymore." Emily tried to nod, but it was hard to stay focused. She just wanted Jason to be there, but he wasn't. She had trusted him to take care of her, to be there when she needed him the most, but now she was relying on these strangers to help her through this terrifying moment. She closed her eyes, trying to slow her breathing as the man kept talking to her, encouraging her to stay calm. "Help is on the way. Just a little longer, okay?" Minutes felt like hours, but eventually, the sound of sirens grew louder. The ambulance arrived, and paramedics rushed out, ready to help. The woman and man stepped back to allow the professionals to take over, but not before giving Emily one last reassuring look. "You're going to be okay," the woman said softly before stepping aside. As the paramedics took over, Emily felt a sense of relief wash over her. She wasn't alone anymore. These strangers had saved her in a moment of need, and for the first time in what felt like forever, she felt a spark of hope. Jason sat in the driver's seat of his car, heading toward the small town. His thoughts were filled with the excitement of the trip ahead. He had promised Emily that this vacation would be their chance to relax and escape from everything, and he was looking forward to it. He had no idea how much his wife was suffering back in the car, and he still didn't fully understand the seriousness of the situation. It wasn't until he received a phone call that his world began to shift. His phone rang, and when he saw his brother's name on the screen, he picked it up without thinking. "Hey, what's up?" Jason asked, his voice cheerful, unaware of the gravity of the situation. "Jason, where are you?" his brother asked, sounding alarmed. "Emily's in labor. She's been left on the side of the road. People stopped to help, but she's in a bad way." Jason's heart dropped. "What? No, that can't be right. I was just with her. I left her for a minute to grab something, and now she's in labor." His voice faltered, and his grip on the steering wheel tightened. His brother sighed deeply. "Jason, this is serious. You need to turn around and get back to her now." Jason's mind raced as the weight of the situation sank in. How had he let things get this far? He had been so focused on the trip, on completing what they had planned, that he hadn't realized how quickly things had escalated. His stomach twisted with guilt. Emily had begged him to stop earlier. She had asked him to pull over, but he had insisted they keep going. He had brushed off her fears, thinking that she was just being overly dramatic. Now, as he listened to his brother's voice, the reality of his decision hit him like a brick. He had left his wife in the middle of labor, alone and in pain, just to continue a trip that seemed so insignificant now. "Where is she? I need to get back to her." Jason's voice was filled with panic as he made an immediate U-turn, his mind swirling with regret. "She's with some good Samaritans," his brother said, trying to reassure him. "They're helping her, but you need to get back. The ambulance is on its way." Jason gripped the steering wheel harder, his knuckles turning white. He had been so selfish, so focused on his own desires, that he had failed to see how important this moment was. Emily had trusted him. She had trusted him to take care of her, to be there for her in one of the most important moments of their lives. And instead, he had walked away. His eyes welled up with tears, but he wiped them away quickly. He had to focus. He had to make it right. He couldn't believe what he had done, but he could still fix it. He had to be there for her now, no matter what. The drive back to Emily felt like an eternity. The guilt gnawed at him with every passing mile, and all he could think about was how badly he had messed up. His heart pounded as he pushed the car faster, eager to make it to her, to apologize, and to make sure she was safe. As he neared the spot where he had left her, he saw the flashing lights of the ambulance in the distance. His heart sank further as he pulled over to the side of the road. He knew she was being taken care of, but it didn't change the fact that he had abandoned her when she needed him most. Jason took a deep breath, preparing himself for the confrontation that was waiting for him. He wasn't sure how Emily would react, but he knew one thing for certain: he had a lot to make up for. Jason pulled his car to the side of the road, his hands trembling. The ambulance was already there, parked just a little ahead of him. The flashing lights filled the air, and paramedics rushed around the vehicle. Jason's heart pounded in his chest as he stepped out of his car, his eyes desperately searching for Emily. He spotted her immediately, lying on a stretcher, her face pale but calm, thanks to the professional help she was receiving. Emily looked exhausted, her eyes half closed from pain, but when she saw him, her expression turned cold. Jason felt his stomach tighten at the sight. He wanted to run to her, to apologize and explain himself, but something inside him told him that it wouldn't be enough. One of the paramedics, a woman with short brown hair and a serious expression, stepped over to him. "Sir, are you the husband?" she asked. Jason nodded quickly, his voice shaky. "Yes, I'm Jason. How is she? Is the baby okay?" The paramedic gave him a quick, professional glance. "The baby is coming soon. She's in a lot of pain, but we're getting her to the hospital now. You should ride with us." Jason followed the paramedics, his feet feeling heavier with each step. He couldn't believe he was in this situation. It was supposed to be a happy time, a special moment in their lives. But now everything felt like it had gone wrong, and it was his fault. As the paramedics loaded Emily into the ambulance, Jason climbed in beside her. The doors closed, and the sirens wailed as the ambulance sped toward the hospital. Emily didn't speak. She just stared out the window, her breath shallow, clearly focused on getting through the pain. Jason sat there, feeling more helpless than he had ever felt in his life. "Emily," he whispered, but she didn't answer. He didn't blame her. What could he say? How could he make up for leaving her behind? For not listening to her when she asked for help? Minutes passed, but it felt like hours. The road was bumpy, and Emily's body jerked with each turn. Jason reached out, unsure if she would let him touch her. Hesitantly, he placed his hand on hers. "I'm so sorry, Emily," he said quietly, his voice breaking. "I should have listened to you. I shouldn't have left you alone. Please forgive me." Emily didn't pull away, but she didn't look at him either. Her silence was heavier than any words could have been. Jason felt the weight of her disappointment, and it crushed him. All he wanted was to make things right, to take back the terrible decision he had made, but there was no way to turn back time. The ambulance came to a stop in front of the hospital, and the paramedics immediately began to wheel Emily inside. Jason followed closely behind, feeling a sense of urgency that he hadn't experienced before. This was real now. This wasn't about a vacation or a trip. It was about his wife, the woman he loved, and their baby. As they entered the hospital, a nurse quickly took charge, guiding them to a delivery room. Jason stood in the hallway, his mind racing. Emily was in the hands of professionals now, but he still felt the burning guilt. How could he have done this to her? He glanced toward the door of the delivery room, waiting for any sign that things were going to be okay. His mind was flooded with thoughts of how he could make up for his mistakes, but for now, all he could do was wait. The hours dragged on, and Jason could barely keep still. He paced back and forth in the hospital waiting room, his mind running in circles. He had no idea how long it had been since they arrived, but the guilt gnawed at him with every minute. All he could think about was how he had left Emily alone on the side of the road, trusting that everything would be fine. But everything had fallen apart. He wanted to be in the room with her, to hold her hand, to apologize again and again, but the doctors and nurses had told him to wait outside. They said it was better for Emily to have the space and focus on bringing their baby into the world. Jason had no choice but to wait. Every few minutes, a nurse would pass by and give him a quick update. "She's doing well," they'd say. "It's a long process, but she's strong. Don't worry." But Jason couldn't help but worry. The longer he waited, the worse his thoughts became. He imagined all the things that could have gone wrong because of his actions. He had left her when she needed him the most. What if something happened to Emily or their baby? What if his decision had caused them both more pain than they could ever overcome? Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the door to the delivery room opened. Jason's heart skipped a beat as he rushed forward, his eyes fixed on the nurse standing in the doorway. "Is she okay? Is everything all right?" Jason asked, his voice trembling with hope and fear. The nurse smiled gently, a look of reassurance in her eyes. "Everything went well. The baby is healthy, and Emily is resting now. You can see them both in a few minutes." Jason felt a wave of relief wash over him. He had expected the worst, but hearing the words "healthy" and "everything went well" was like a weight lifting off his shoulders. It wasn't over yet, but for the first time that day, he allowed himself to breathe again. "Can I see them now?" he asked, his voice soft with emotion. "Of course," the nurse said, stepping aside to let him through. Jason walked into the room, his heart pounding in his chest. There, lying in the bed, was Emily. She looked exhausted, but her face was calm, and she was holding a tiny bundle in her arms. Their baby. Jason's eyes filled with tears as he walked closer, not sure what to say or do. Emily looked up at him, Her eyes were tired, but there was something else in them too, a quiet strength, a strength that Jason had always admired in her. She didn't say anything at first, but the way she looked at him said it all. "I'm sorry, Emily," Jason whispered, his voice breaking. "I'm so sorry. I should have never left you. I promise I'll make it right. I will always be here for you and our baby." Emily didn't say anything for a moment, just held the baby close to her chest. Jason's heart ached as he waited for her to speak. Finally, she looked at him, her eyes soft but serious. "It's okay, Jason," she said quietly. "It's over now. You're here. That's what matters." Jason felt a rush of emotions: relief, guilt, hope, but most of all, gratitude. He didn't deserve her forgiveness, but hearing those words from her meant more than anything. He didn't know if their relationship could ever go back to what it was before, but he knew one thing for sure. He would do anything to make it work. He would be there for her and their child, no matter what. As he looked at his newborn baby, his heart swelled with love. He had made a huge mistake, but now he had a chance to be a better man, a better husband, and a better father. Jason sat in the quiet hospital room, staring at the tiny baby in Emily's arms. The little one, so small and fragile, was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. The baby's tiny fingers curled around Emily's hand, and Jason couldn't help but feel a rush of emotion. This moment should have been full of joy and excitement, but instead it was overshadowed by the guilt that still weighed heavily on him. Emily looked up at him, her eyes tired but kind. She had been through so much today, and Jason knew he had caused her pain. He had left her when she needed him most, and it had nearly cost them everything. The baby's birth, the happiest moment of their lives, had become a reminder of his failure. "Emily," Jason whispered, his voice full of regret. "I will never forgive myself for what I did. I left you when I should have stayed. I should have been there for you." Emily's expression softened, but she didn't respond right away. She looked down at the baby, gently rocking her back and forth, as if trying to find the right words. Jason waited, his heart heavy in his chest. "I know you're sorry, Jason," she said finally, her voice steady but quiet. "And I know you didn't mean to hurt me, but you did. You broke my trust, and it's going to take time to fix that." Jason nodded, feeling the weight of her words. He had always known that trust was the foundation of their relationship, but now he realized just how easily he had shattered it. He had taken her for granted, assuming she would always be there, no matter what. But now, he could see how much his actions had affected her, and how much they would have to work through together. "I understand," Jason said, his voice thick with emotion. "I know I've made a mistake, and I don't expect things to go back to normal overnight. I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make things right. I'll be here for you and the baby, every step of the way." Emily looked up at him, her eyes searching his face. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then, slowly, she nodded. "It's going to take time, Jason. You can't fix everything with just words. But I believe you. I believe you want to change." Jason felt a small spark of hope. He had hurt her, and he couldn't take that back. But maybe, just maybe, they could find a way to move forward. It wouldn't be easy, and it wouldn't happen quickly, but he was willing to try. For her, for their baby. As they sat there together, the baby sleeping peacefully between them, Jason knew that this was just the beginning of a new chapter in their lives. It wasn't going to be perfect, and there would be challenges ahead, but they had the chance to rebuild what had been broken. The road to healing was long, but for the first time that day, Jason felt a sense of peace. Emily's forgiveness, though still tentative, was a step in the right direction, and he would do whatever it took to earn back her trust, to be the husband and father he knew he could be. As the hours passed, Emily finally allowed herself to relax, her tired eyes closing for a brief rest. Jason sat quietly beside her, watching their baby sleep, and for the first time in a long while, he felt a sense of purpose. He had made mistakes, but he was ready to move forward. Together, weeks passed, and things slowly began to settle into a new rhythm. Emily and Jason found themselves adjusting to life with their newborn. The tiny baby, who had once been a symbol of fear and guilt, now brought them closer together. Though Jason still carried the weight of his past mistake, the love for his child and the hope of rebuilding his relationship with Emily gave him strength. He had learned many hard lessons during those first few days after the birth. He had learned that no matter how well-planned things seemed, life could always surprise you. He had learned the importance of trust and that it was something that couldn't be easily regained once lost. But most of all, he had learned just how precious the people you love are, and how important it is to be there for them, no matter what. One evening, as Emily sat nursing the baby in the quiet of their living room, Jason stood in the doorway, watching her. He couldn't help but smile at the sight. The baby was small, with Emily's eyes and his nose, a perfect blend of both of them. He couldn't believe how lucky he was, even after everything that had happened. "I'm sorry again," Jason said, his voice soft as he walked into the room. Emily looked up at him, her eyes full of understanding. "Jason, we've talked about this. You've apologized. It's not about saying sorry anymore. It's about showing it, every single day. And you are. That's what matters." Jason sat beside her, his eyes never leaving the baby. He still couldn't believe how much he had missed in the past, how much he had taken for granted. But now he was here, and he would do whatever it took to prove to Emily that he was ready to be the husband and father she deserved. "Thank you for giving me a chance," Jason said, his voice thick with emotion. "I know it's not easy, but I'll keep working on being the best I can be for you and for our baby. I'll never make that mistake again." Emily smiled, though there was a quiet sadness in her eyes. "It's not about perfection, Jason. It's about being there when it counts. It's about showing up, even when it's hard. And you're doing that now. That's all I can ask for." Jason nodded. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, and he knew that. He and Emily had a lot to work through, but this was the beginning of something new, something they could build together. It wouldn't be a perfect journey, but as long as they had each other, he was willing to face whatever came their way. Over the next few months, Jason continued to prove himself. He was there for Emily, supporting her in every way he could. He woke up early to help with the baby. He made sure Emily had time to rest, and he made sure that, no matter what, they were always a team. The trust that had been broken slowly began to rebuild, one small action at a time. And while the memory of that day on the road would never completely fade, it no longer defined their relationship. It had become a turning point, a painful lesson that led to growth and understanding. Jason had learned the true meaning of commitment, and in doing so, he had found a deeper connection with Emily than ever before. They weren't perfect, but they were moving forward, and that, Jason realized, was more than enough.